I'm gonna be completing the entire Pokemon franchise in chronological order, both in a hardcore Nuzlocke setting and without using a single repeat Pokemon between games. So if I use Mudkip and Emerald, I can't use it in Omega Ruby, Alpha Sapphire, anywhere at all. Rules are in the description, including some frequently asked questions from the previous videos. Speaking of which, if you haven't checked those out yet, I'd highly suggest watching those first to see what Pokemon I've used. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on any parts of this 10-episode series as we lead into the release of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, especially since 80% of viewers are unsubscribed, and I'd hate to see you all miss out on this series. And let's begin! Finally, the game that started it all for me. Pokemon FireRed was my first Pokemon game, and I, like an imbecile, decided to choose Charmander because it was the pre-evolution of the cover monster. And it was orange and red when the latter was my favorite color, but armed with the knowledge I've gained over the years, over the past 18 of them that I have been playing this franchise, I believe choosing Charmander is the right option, and that's because we already used Bulbasaur and Squirtle. Too much lead off for not enough payoff, but I will admit that I needed to ensure I got good enough IVs from picking the starter in order to have enough defense to stand up against Brock's Onix and Rock Tomb, as well as enough attack for Metal Claw, and enough special attack for Ember. HP was also a slight worry, but all I had to do was ensure it was over like 6 IVs, which wasn't hard. For here though, it's a simple EV train on Mankeys for attack and a few speed EVs from Rattata and Pidgey, and we're set to go. Brock's Geodude isn't a problem, simply Metal Claw and attempt to get attack boosts, in which I do get one of them, going into Onix with nearly full HP after only taking a single tackle. This is pretty much the perfect setup, as Metal Claw does slightly under half, and with Rock Tomb missing once, I knew it was a done deal, especially when the next turn saw Ember burning, having Onix's attack and making the fight a cakewalk from there. A few more Embers and Metal Claws through healing items takes him down, allowing Charmander to evolve into Charmeleon in the process. Sweet. One badge down, and it's time for an additional team member. As much as I'd like to leave Gyarados for a later gen, I just don't think it'll see much use outside of exactly Gen 4, but Gen 4 has a ton of Pokemon that are already great in their own right, so I figured why not get my water type for this run, right on Route 4 with the Magikarp for $500. And since the level cap for Misty is 21, I should be good to just run through her with Gyarados. I'm EV training this one in attack and speed, obviously. Despite the reliance on special attacks like Water Pulse, Bite, Surf, and Ice Beam throughout the main game, for the Elite Four I'm looking to have Strength and Earthquake alongside Dragon Dance to boost the power of those moves, so we'll be sticking with that. However, our rival is waiting for us on Nugget Bridge, so after evolving Magikarp with the power of Struggle, we're ready to go 2 against 4, leading Charmeleon against Pidgeotto, and two-shotting it with Ember thanks to a critical that also burned. This leads to Squirtle, who goes down to 3 Mega Punches without any missing despite a use of Withdraw, increasing his defense. Third out is Abra as my Oranberry heals 10 HP, taking it out with a single Mega Punch, leaving just Rattata to fall to 2 Embers to win me the fight. Of course, Gyarados was in the back in case I felt threatened, but now I can safely take out the trainers on routes 24 and 25 before taking on Misty. She's rockin' 2 Pokemon as well, first being Staryu as Gyarados is able to lay in with Bite, and since Dark-type attacks are special in this generation, I'm able to bypass Harden, KOing quickly with that and Tackle and leading to Starmie. With this gal's part Psychic type, I can get the double damage plus the chance to flinch with Bite, and all I need is to stack 1 or 2 of them together through constant recover in order to eventually win the fight. Though when she chooses to use Swift instead of Recover, that will also work. 2 down, 6 to go, and a few dozen more after that. Putting it into perspective for one of these videos tends to make my brain explode. So it's about time I add some more members to the team. Charmeleon is not going to be enough to take out Surge despite access to Dig, and Gyarados is quad weak to electric type moves. So by heading into Diglett's cave, I'm lucky enough to not find an overleveled Diglett, giving me the perfect Pokemon to just sweep through Surge undeterred. Once again, another Pokemon that has to be EV trained in attack and speed, but Dugtrio's already one of the fastest Pokemon in Kanto and already has a massive attack stat, so further boosting both of those, matched with multiple types of coverage like Rock Tomb and Aerial Ace, should put us in a great spot with this Dingledork. With this bugger in hand though, I need to make sure that Gary is taken out before I can get to Surge. Pidgeotto's the lead again, being 3-shot by Gyarados' newly obtained Water Pulse thanks to Misty, leading to Raticate, who falls to 3 bites despite Tail Whip lowering my defense, mostly because of a flinch that prevented him from taking advantage. Third out is Kadabra, pretty easy KO with 2 bites despite confusion doing some damage, leaving just Wartortle. I figured with my other 2 Pokemon that are weak to water, I would just sit in here and wail on him with Tackle and Bite, eventually KOing with just over a quarter HP remaining to win the fight. Gyarados is putting in quite a bit of work despite her physical attack far outweighing her special attack, but Bite is still putting in work, so I'm pretty happy. Even though it won't be useful for Surge though, I went ahead and grabbed a Spearow from Route 4 in order to get the Farfetch'd trade for Vermilion City as our encounter there, seeing as we won't get a really good opportunity to use it again until X and Y, and once again we have better Pokemon available there to use, and it's really only useful as an in-game trade in Santaloon City to go against Viola. Other than that, it's really not that good. However, here, it gets Swords Dance by level up, so we've got to make sure that Farfetch stays safe, especially because the Swords Dance TM is stuck in the Sevi Islands post-game material, so having this access is like a gold mine for me. Alright, Surge time. Dig, dug, done. Need I say more? I only have plans for one more team member for this run, since I think this team is already absolutely stacked. It just needs an electric type, and that happens to be Jolteon. Thanks to the Eevee in Celadon City, I can hand it a Thunderstone immediately to give me Jolteon, and since Eevee wasn't used in battle, I still have it safe to use in XD for later in the video. And in case you were curious, no, I don't plan on talking about Rock Tunnel because I hate Flash. At least in Gen 1 I could see my way around the walls as opposed to a small field of vision where I'm just running into walls blindly because of it. Though I suppose while on an aside, Jolteon's Eevee sprite is going to be a special attacker. Just dump them in special attack for Thunderbolt and speed to outspeed everything. Unfortunately, there's just not much else for Jolteon to do, even just special-wise, though we get physical options like Iron Tail, Return, Dig, and Shadow Ball TM, as well as Double Kick and Pin Missile by level up. Jolteon's just not a physical attacker. Guess that's the curse of the older games, though you would think this sort of thing would be balanced by midway through Gen 3. Stupidity aside, we've got a wide selection of important battles to go after at this point, so we can either go for Erica first to increase the level cap past 29, Giovanni to get the Sylph Scope, or the rival in Pokemon Tower if I want to get the experience from there first. I figured Giovanni would at least be a challenge at this level still, so I went in guns blazing with Gyarados, blasting both Onix and Rhyhorn with 1 Water Pulse each, before getting to Kangaskhan, blasting it with 3 Dragon Rages to KO and win the fight. Well, so much for getting a challenge out of that, but now we can take on the rival before Erica. That'll fare well, right? Well, Farfetch'd finally gets some love here, being able to take out his lead Pidgeotto with Flying Cut, though Gust manages to hit and do double damage while Farfetch'd is in the air, putting him at too low of HP to continue him with Growlithe, so I swap into Gyarados, delivering 2 Dragon Rages to KO, doing the same to Execute after taking Confusion. 2 Bites ends up felling the follow-up Kadabra to take him down as well, leaving just Wartortle. And wouldn't you know, Dragon Rage does a ton of damage, though I'm dumb and don't go for it first, so it's a 3-shot rather than 2, but who cares since Gyarados is a monstrosity of a Pokemon at this point, so I don't need to worry. However, what I do need to worry about is yeah, I can't even get through that sentence without cracking. What's there to worry about Erica? She's got Victory Bell taken out by Farfetch'd's Fly, as is Tangela and Vileplume all in 1 shot each, not landing a single attack and allowing me to get through unscathed. That's what we're talking about. All gas, no ass, baby! I suppose that just leaves some optimization of movesets across the region before going into the mid-game gauntlet of the rival, Giovanni, Koga, and Sabrina before pushing into endgame. And that's pretty easy, getting moves like Return for Farfetch'd, a much more powerful stab than Cut, Thunderbolt for Jolteon, Flamethrower, the works, everything, you know, TMs. So, rival fight first, and he's leading Pidgeot. Thunderbolt from Jolteon, easily outed, as is Growlithe surprisingly. Farfetch'd has to be brought in for Execute, and thanks to a Stun Spore, I can't exactly safely use Fly without being prevented a whole bunch. So instead, I go for 2 returns, thankfully hitting enough to KO as Alakazam comes in. Now while this would normally be very threatening, Rival 5's Alakazam doesn't actually have any attacking moves, with the exception of the delayed Future Sight, so I can get away with getting a KO here with Return, then swapping into Gyarados for Blastoise in order to take the attack, but it fails anyway, so who cares? From here, it's Strength Spam to KO and win the bout, easy as can be. So what about Giovanni? Well, since I've got a ground type, it makes a lot of it easier. KOing Nidorino with Dig, then seeing Kangaskhan, so I dip into Gyarados, taking 3 Tail Whips in a row as 3 Strength KOs and leads to Rhyhorn, going down to a single Surf. Well, shoot, I'm not leaving her out here to get pummeled by Nidoqueen, so I swap into Charizard to take Body Slam and get the defense off, though coming in on Body Slam and getting paralyzed is a bit unfortunate. However, it doesn't end up doing a damn thing as Surf KOs in 2 shots to win. Can't be disappointed with an outcome like that, and neither can I be disappointed with Koga when Farfetch'd is able to take on the first Coughing with a single fly, Muck with 2 returns despite getting poisoned, and the second Coughing with a critical return as Weezing comes in last. Now that's an easy swap into Gyarados to try nullifying all of those physical poison moves with Intimidate, doing the same by swapping back and forth between Jolteon and itself to get to 3 Intimidate drops, though everybody ends up getting poisoned in the process. Dugtrio, Jolteon, Gyarados, Farfetch'd, everybody. Even Charizard after coming in and finishing cleanup duty with Flamethrower to win the fight. Never have I seen my entire team with the same status at the same time. It's kind of cathartic to just see it all in a row like that. Anyway, Sabrina, what do we do with her? How about Swords Dance being a part of Farfetch'd's natural moveset, then using 4 returns in a row to KO Kadabra, Mr. Mime, Venomoth, and Alakazam to win the fight? Now that sounds pretty handy, no wonder I chose to use Farfetch'd in this game. That's broken, as I said before, Swords Dance is stuck behind the post-game on the Sevi Islands. Speaking of which, we won't be going there since it's optional to the main game, and we're not doing round 2 in this because I don't feel like catching 60 Pokemon. I've done that enough already with the Professor Oak challenge in, 25 games? I don't even remember how many of those I've done. But just ahead is Blaine, and would you expect that Gyarados is a good Pokemon? Surf ends up KOing both his Growlithe and Ponyta in 1 shot each, leading to Rapidash, whom I just start getting trouble from by surviving Surf over and over again thanks to Hyper Potions. In fact, I start fumbling the bag quite hard here, thinking I could save a Surf Power Point for Arcanine, as I didn't go back to the Pokemon Center to heal said points beforehand. So I go for Ice Beam while he's in the red, and he survives. This leads to a bounce that of course has to Paralyze to capitalize on my mistake, as Gyarados stays in, paralyzed for 2 turns before I can finally finish him with a bite. All that's left is Arcanine, and while I can get a single Surf off to get him into the low yellow, I have to swap into something else pronto. Thankfully, Farfetch'd is perfect for the job, taking Takedown, which brings him into the red, outspeeding next turn, and KOing with Return. Phew! I think that's the closest fight we've had so far this run, and somehow it was because of Mr. Super Potion Extraordinaire over there. Thank the Lord they finally decided to give you Hyper Potions. All that's left to handle is Giovanni, and Surf does that pretty handily, taking out Rhyhorn number 2, Dugtrio, and then a few to Nidoqueen, who just keeps surviving them on barely any HP, forcing some full restores, though once she's down, Nidoking falls to a single Surf, all from Gyarados to win me the fight. Awesome, half a dozen fights to go, and I'm still feeling pretty darn good about my chances. Now I would talk about the rival fight before Elite 4, but the level cap going up to 60 and no trainers in Victory Road actually being required, I'm actually just able to level up around 10 levels over him at this point, so there's no real challenge to speak of. However, with some team prep, I think we'll get a satisfying experience out of the Elite 4 themselves, after of course grabbing some other held items and TMs. Lorelei's up first, and Jolteon's pretty adept at handling this, as most of her Pokemon are part Water type, taking out Dugong with a few Shockwaves, as while Thunderbolt would one-shot, we can bait out all the full restores we need before getting to Lapras, whom we don't have a high likelihood of one-shotting due to it being a range. This fetches a few out of her before KOing Dugong and Cloyster with 1 more Shockwave. Third out is Slowbro, and we gotta bust out the big guns, and bustin' makes me feel good as Slowbro goes down to Thunderbolt, and we actually do get the one-shot on Lapras out 4th, leaving just Jinx to fall to 2 Thunderbolts after foregoing any status conditions and instead going straight for Ice Punch. I had planned around a Lovely Kiss, but I suppose she knew the game was over before it even began. Bruno's up second, and Gyarados is the perfect out thanks to Dragon Dance nullifying the speed drops of Rock Tomb, increasing my attack stat enough to KO the fighting types, while Ice Beam manages to out Onix. I don't have Surf on this set as I need both Earthquake and Strength for Dragon Dance to boost, while Ice Beam needs to be there for Lance, so this is the best setup I can do. After 2 Dragon Dances, I can hit the first Onix with Ice Beam, KOing, then setting up a 3rd Dragon Dance as Hitmonchan comes in second, and of course goes for Rock Tomb. I was hoping to get at least one of those speed boosts, but it seems like I drained all of my luck on Brock with those Rock Tomb misses. He goes down to 1 strength, as does Machamp and Hitmonlee, leaving just the second Onix to barely survive Ice Beam on a range, hitting double edge and not doing recoil to itself thanks to Rock Head, but it doesn't matter as it goes down next turn, even through a Hyper Potion thanks to a high roll Ice Beam. Sweet, 2 down, 3 to go as Agatha's out 3rd, and she's surprisingly easy. Despite the Levitate ability, I can just brute force her with Jolteon, powering my way through Gengar, Golbat, Arbok, Gengar number 2, and Haunter with a myriad of Thunderbolt and Shockwave without even getting touched myself. Wow, that sounds incredibly terrible now that I worded it like that. That aside, I guess Oonga Boonga Beatdown truly is the only strategy that works. Activate Path to the Peak, flip Skill Drain, cast Humility, whatever flavor of bullshit you play in your card games, that's basically how this fight can be summed up. I mean, we can kinda just deem the next fight the same as after Jolteon takes out Gyarados with Thunderbolt, it's kind of just a beatdown from here. However, I did try to get fancy with it by using Farfetch'd on the first Dragonair to take it down with 2 returns, taking 2 Outrages that brought him down to red HP. So while risky, it was fancy and that's what we care about here. Third out is Aerodactyl, using Wing Attack as I swap back out into Jolteon, Thunderbolting for the KO as Dragonair number 2 comes out 4th. And since for some reason I'm being so stubbornly stubborn, I swap into Charizard, taking a Thunder Wave to get paralyzed, then using Dragon Claw after seeing Safeguard used only to get a low roll, then next turn get a high roll after a full restore to KO and leave just Dragonite. I can survive a critical Outrage here, so I'm going to go for a single Dragon Claw, then swap into Gyarados and use Ice Beam for the quad effective damage, and as fate would have it, this works out perfectly. Alright, champion time as we're just starting off strong with a one-shot with Jolteon and Thunderbolt on Pidgeot, then hard countering Rhydon out second by swapping into Gyarados on Earthquake in order to take advantage of that sweet flying type. Though I did forget to delete Ice Beam over Surf, so that hurts, but Earthquake is still a 2-shot. Even through Scary Face, I'm able to outspeed, leading to Alakazam who falls to an Earthquake despite Psychic doing a little under half. Fourth it is Executor, and I guess keeping Ice Beam was a plus since it does a little less than half as he sets up Light Screen. No problemo, just gotta shift out into Charizard, take a Sleep Powder, then dodge a bunch of Egg Bombs before using Fire Blast to KO as Blastoise comes out 5th. As much as I would love to replay Pokemon Origins, I'm not dealing with that shit. I swap into Jolteon and one-shot with Thunderbolt, leaving just Arcanine who nearly gets taken out by my Charizard and Dragon Claw, but full restores do prevent me from being able to. From here, it's a simple swap out into Gyarados though, both getting the Intimidate drop for extreme speed, and using the super effective Earthquake to KO and win the fight, finishing Pokemon FireRed by only using 9 Pokemon. Charmander, Charmeleon, Charizard, Magikarp, Gyarados, Farfetch'd, Diglett, Dugtrio, and Jolteon. That is a pretty solid but very small amount, and we're always looking to save Pokemon for future games when they get more difficult and we end up seeing more deaths. So, for LeafGreen, we have no remaining starters. We'll be forced to grab a new Pokemon on Route 1 immediately to replace it. I take Bulbasaur since it's the most useful as an HM user, then grab Rattata from Route 1's Grass, and Spearow from Route 22. I've left 1 encounter per area before Brock to ensure that I had enough fodder to get through him for this run in specific, so Caterpie on Route 2 and Kakuna in the Viridian Forest is all I need to make sure he's taken down. 4 Pokemon before the first gym may seem like overkill, but if I need to, I'm planning on sacking Beedrill and Rattata to him if need be. I've got future encounters like the version-exclusive Vulpix and Slowpoke, Hitmonlee and Saffron, anything in the Safari Zone, most likely Dratini, as well as either Raichu, Magneton, or Electabuzz from the power plant. At least those are the plans. Who knows how things will pan out. As for EVs, Rattata, Spearow, and Beedrill are all getting the physical attacker treatment with attack and speed, while Butterfree is just getting speed for now, as special attack EVs aren't available until we hit level 8 Abra on Route 24. So, with all of that preparation, how does Brock end up going? Well, my strategy is simple. Use Spearow to growl Geodude 6 times in order to reduce Tackle's effectiveness, as he has no attacking moves other than Tackle, then swap into Butterfree, use Harden 6 times after using Poison Powder, then using Infusion to take out Geodude. This leaves just enough HP to survive 2 Rock Tombs, barring a critical hit, and thankfully, I only have to take one of those as Poison Powder and Confusion do the Rock Snake in, winning me the battle without any losses. Jeez, the Pokemon I expected to sack were the ones I didn't even end up using. Guess I could have saved Rattata and Weedle for the Let's Go games, but since I'm not grabbing any encounters in those other than the beginning grass types, it probably doesn't matter. Since I'm not grabbing any encounters anytime soon, we can just move straight into Cerulean City and the rival on Nugget Bridge, as Rattata tears through Pidgeotto with 2 Hyper Fangs, Beedrill takes out most of his Rattata's HP with Fury Swipes before Spearow comes in and finishes it with Peck, as Charmander is his 3rd follow-up. It goes down to 2 Fury attacks though, despite Spearow pulling dangerously close to death at 3 HP, but I'm able to get through it as well as Abra to win the fight. Definitely risky, but I'm playing this game fast and loose with the number of options I'm afforded myself here, so I'm pretty much fine. Misty's up next, and Raticate tears through her here, using 1 Hyper Fang to take out Staryu, and 2 for Starmie, avoiding confusion from the latter's Water Pulse. Well then, what about the rival fight on the SSN? Well, it's mostly the same. Hyper Fang and Quick Attack tears through Pidgeotto, and Hyper Fang destroys the Mirror Raticate, leading to Kadabra. Now, since my newly evolved Fearow has Keen Eye and I'm predicting Kinesis, I swap over and I'm rewarded by seeing said Kinesis, KOing next turn with Fury Attack and leaving just Charmeleon. Obviously, Fury Attack is going to be the key to winning here, and sure enough, after 2 shots of it, hitting 5 in total, I'm able to KO and win the fight through several Embers. Alright, well, what about Lieutenant Surge? Well, there's not much to hit him with, aside from Raticate learning Dig by TM, and we do have a Cherry Berry. And we do have several Pokemon in the attempt to avoid being paralyzed, though oddly enough, we don't even need any of that. Instead, thanks to Beedrill learning Twin Needle, we're able to heal lock Voltorb after landing a single Shockwave for minimal damage, as for some reason Beedrill also occupies that weird same spot that Kecleon did in the last video, as the physical attacker that is also a special tank, KOing and leading into Pikachu. This is a one-shot with Twin Needle, leaving just Raichu, and Twin Needle manages to both hit and poison before Double Team is used even once, allowing for a full heal to be wasted as Twin Needle hits one more time to KO and win me the fight. That poison turn also gave me a free turn just in case I missed thanks to that Double Team, seeing as I could have just outsped again on the following turn and potentially hit them. Gotta love those extra layers of protection where you can find them in Nuzlocke runs. Since this is the 5th time through Kanto so far this series, I'll spare you the details of moving through the areas, though I did grab our 5th team member in Vulpix from Route 8 before getting into the next gauntlet of fights in Erica, the rival in Pokemon Tower, and Giovanni in that order. See, Vulpix learns Flamethrower at level 29 by level up in Gen 3, so we can EV train it in Special Attack and Speed, get there, use a Firestone, then fight Erica and immediately burn down her entire gym by getting 3 one-shot KOs thanks to that there move. You could say, it burns! No, it's good to see that the spirit of YouTube poop still hasn't departed my brain yet. TM for Giga Drain in hand and quickly on Butterfree, I'm able to move ahead to the rival instead of Giovanni first, as Ninetales just tears through Pidgeotto in one shot. In fact, the only Pokemon I can't do that with is Gyarados, so I swap into Raticate, destroy it with Hyper Fang and Quick Attack, then swap Ninetales back in to fall asleep because of Execute's Hypnosis. However, she does wake up within 2 turns, then one-shots Execute with Flamethrower, though Leech Seed is already set up, so I'm on a clock. Kadabra comes out next and goes down to Iron Tail, so my clock is still okay. Of course, this just leaves Charmeleon, and fighting fire with fire isn't necessarily a good idea, though it is metal as if Metallica has taught me anything. Though they also taught me that the timing in that song is really weird. Seriously, if you hear the riff exactly 1 minute into the song, you'll get what I mean, and that's coming from an on and off again guitar player for a couple of years. I just still do not comprehend how they managed to play that. But I digress. Charmeleon is annihilated with my newly swapped in Fearow and 2 Aerial Aces, winning the match. Giovanni straight afterwards, and Butterfree takes care of both Onix and Rhyhorn with Giga Drain, leaving just Kangaskhan to take nearly no damage from either that or Psychic, taking around half from them combined as she nearly destroys Butterfree with Mega Punch, so I swap into Ninetales to attempt to KO at less than half with Flamethrower. but of course it's a range, so we're destined to fail that range. Not a problem though, Ninetales was never at risk of being KO'd by Kangaskhan, so we can just use the second one next turn to win. One mid-game gauntlet down, one more to go, but before we walk into that insanity, I can drag Butterfree into the fighting dojo, destroy everyone with Psychic, then grab a Hitmonlee from the back of the area. I figured Hitmonchan is not good until Generation 4 and beyond due to the elemental punches all remaining special in this generation, whereas Hitmonchan will get much more useful once probably the Let's Go games roll around, so we'll probably save him for that point. Hitmonlee is a fast physical attacker who gets moves like Brick Break, Rock Slide, Return, Facade, Strength, and Earthquake, so we've got a myriad of very strong moves to take care of upcoming threats. Alright then, Rival 5 time, and I decide to go with Fearow as the lead to show who the superior bird is, using Return and Aerial Ace to KO as Gyarados comes in and lowers my physical attack. Unfortunate, but I can swap Butterfree in and do around half before Dragon Rage does too much, swapping Eradicate to KO with Strength. 2 down, 3 to go as Charizard steps onto the field using Flamethrower, though I'm able to bait him into walking into Ninetales' Flash Fire ability by swapping into it, then using multiple Flamethrowers of my own to nearly KO, bringing him within an inch of his life before swapping into Fearow out of necessity from too much wing attack damage. This from here I can KO with Aerial Ace leading to Execute. Now, while I can't KO at this point, I can at least hit Aerial Ace to nearly KO, seeing Sleep Powder put Fearow to sleep as Confusion hits my incoming Beedrill for super effective damage. Not that it matters though, both this and his outcoming Alakazam are both weak to Bug, and they're brittle in terms of their physical defense, and are outsped by Beedrill, L plus Ratio plus your White. Not gonna lie, I didn't expect Beedrill and Butterfree to put in as much work as they have so far. I'm tempted not even to get new team members because of this, but I will likely grab a few for the league. Giovanni's last up on the list, with Nidorino being destroyed before Butterfree can even be attacked thanks to a Psychic and Giga Drain, picking up a KO off of that missed range, leading to Rhyhorn, who falls to a single Giga Drain. Half down, half to go as Kangaskhan's out third, and no surprise here, it does a boatload of damage as per usual. Though putting her to sleep after taking Fake Out lets me swap into Hitmonlee, but of course I forget about Early Bird being an ability. She wakes up and hits Mega Punch for a little over half, so I swap into Ninetales in the attempt to get Will-O-Wisp to have her attack stat, successfully doing so as well as making herself hit with Confuse Ray. I should be able to just take the battle back in my favor now, as I can swap into Fearow, use Return, then use Burn damage to finish her off in order to ensure that Nidoqueen doesn't have much of a chance of KOing anything on my team. Fearow's able to hit Return for half on her, but Body Slam Paralysis really bones Fearow's use, though it doesn't matter since I'm able to eventually pivot out into Butterfree and end the battle with Psychic. Giovanni, you really need to stop giving me so many problems. You owe me too much money, damn it! Master Ball in hand now, there shouldn't be too much more difficulty up until the league. However, Koga is sort of difficult without a good Pokemon to hit him for super effective damage. You gotta love how almost all of his Pokemon have Levitate. Hitmonlee's my lead here, not doing much other than using Strength to KO the first Coughing, but not before getting poisoned and being forced out of the battle pretty quickly. Muck is out second, and I really don't want to bring in Butterfree for Psychic yet. I just gotta use my other options, but Double Team is really putting a damper on my plans to use Beedrill and Fury Attack. Eventually, I get low enough HP to where I swap into Fearow, thankfully hitting Drill Peck on my first attack coming in to KO, getting into the second Coughing. I'm able to heal lock this one after taking a single Sludge, KOing and leading to Wheezing, and this is where the wheels fall off. Unfortunately, Spearow gets hit with Sludge and gets poisoned after using Fly with only 15 HP remaining, so we live with 1 HP. Great, now thank the Lord there's no pursuit to worry about, so I swap into Butterfree, finally pulling the trigger on Psychic to KO and win the fight. And you know what? I could have done that so much easier by going out of the way back to Route 10 and using the Good Rod. For what, you ask? Slowpoke. It's a 1% encounter, but everything else available by Good Rod here I've already used, so they've been eliminated thanks to Species Clause. I sure do adore throwing for content, it's 100% always a conscious decision and something I do voluntarily. Anyway, Sabrina's next, and I've got plenty of physical moves to hit her with, mostly with Beedrill and Twin Needle, using that and one-shotting Kadabra and Mr. Mime before Alakazam comes out third. Alakazam ends up using Psychic here, so of course I swap into Slowbro and use 2 Surfs on it to KO through Calm Mind, leading to Venomoth, who's one-shot by Psychic. Now I would have used Twin Needle on Alakazam if Beedrill outsped, but that would have been rather stupid to lose this aggro beatdown piece to such a silly mistake. I've already drained my silly mistake counter on Koga, clearly. Well, it's not too much longer before I can hit up Super Potion Piss Sucker over here and just kill him with Slowbro. Amnesia to protect against fire and dark attacks, then Surf to just rip through Growlithe, Arcanine, Ponyta, and Rapidash in sequence to win the fight. No fear, only drenching. Giovanni's pretty much the same though. Just as I have the Psychic type advantage against Nidoqueen and King, it doesn't really matter since I just KO all of them with Surf. See you later, Chumpstain! Once again, Rival Fight on Route 22 is getting skipped due to sheer level advantage. I mean, seriously, if I'm staying in with Hitmonlee and KOing Alakazam, you know it's an easy fight full of one-shots. So much so that Hitmonlee isn't even hit one time throughout the entirety of it. One victory road later, and let's give Kanto its 5th thrashing, with one addition. I do head to the power plant for any electric type. What do you got for me? Pikachu? Perfect. I didn't use Raichu in yellow since that rat bastard couldn't evolve, so here we are. Throw a Thunderstone on it and we're ready to go. Final team going in is Raichu, Ninetales, Fearow, Butterfree, Hitmonlee, and Slowbro. Unfortunately, Raticate and Beedrill will be sitting this one out because they just don't do the whole physical attacking thing better than Hitmonlee or Fearow can. Lorelei's up first, and as we did with Jolteon and FireRed, it's just a sweep with Thunderbolt and a different flavor of Zapper, using Raichu to one-shot everything up to Lapras, getting confused by Confuse Ray. But who cares, because Raichu's a Chad, not hitting herself and KOing, getting into Jinx, whom we're prepared to two-shot with Brick Break, but she lands a lovely kiss to put her to sleep. So I swap into Ninetales to KO with Flamethrower, but if she of course freezes on the first Ice Punch, well, despite my insistence on using a Fire-type move, we can't thaw out in time, so I swap into Hitmonlee and finish her off with a Rock Slide to KO. Backup plans. Gotta have a plan B, C, D, and E, since if you don't, you're gonna get effed up. That was a terrible joke, but it's almost as terrible as Bruno's battling skills, because Slowbro is just able to solo him despite the anti-Sonic being outsped at every turn, but a mix of Surf and Psychic are able to take out Onix, Hitmonchan, Hitmonlee, Onix number 2, and Machamp in sequence to win the fight. I wasn't even worried about the high crit chance of Cross Chop at the end there, since Slowbro is just such an endurance giant. Speaking of Endurance Giant, all of Agatha's Pokemon are Poison type, so it only makes sense to go Psychic Turbo, KOing Gengar, Golbat, and Arbok without even taking half damage before Gengar number 2 comes in and lands Hypnosis. I was prepared this time, bitch. It gets healed because of a held Lumberry, then Psychic KOs it, and Haunter for the win after the latter misses Hypnosis. Beat down meta, baby! Lance is second to last, and oddly enough, I didn't even bother with Ice Beam here. Mostly because I forgot, but who cares, it's Kanto. We just beat their face in enough times and it eventually works. Lead is Gyarados, so as we did with FireRed, we simply use our electric type of choice to destroy it with Thunderbolt, leading to Dragonair, but I'm actually able to get away with KOing it with Brick Break here, taking Outrage once before getting to the second, who can unfortunately hit Thunder Wave on my electric type, making it impossible for Raichu to take out a third KO here. Unfortunate, especially with Aerodactyl still in the back, but we have Plan B and Slowbro for that. I can just swap it in on the fatigue turns, getting 2 Surfs off with full HP to spare a KO, leading to Dragonite, who, of course, goes as terribly as it physically can. So Psychic is a 2-shot, but I have to hit medium to high ranges on both to KO, but I only hit a medium and a low range, so Psychic is a 3-shot. More than that, after a full restore, on top of that, Outrage gets a critical hit on Dragonite's first turn on the field, taking Slowbro down to just 19 HP before the Citrus Berry and Fatigue set in, but not before the full restore, so I take the shot to use Psychic on that turn, do half, then swap into Ninetales to hope to get the KO with Flamethrower, but once again, I can't. It does too little, so I have to take advantage of the Fatigue turns again to get into Fearow to KO with Drill Peck. Last is Aerodactyl, and despite being at full HP thanks to a Dragonite self-hit, I can't stay in on Ancient Power, so I swap into Hitmonlee, who has just enough HP to survive that in a Wing Attack, luckily seeing Scary Face instead and allowing for a Rock Slide to bring him into the red, as he brings me into the red with Wing Attack. Just enough for me to swap Fearow in on an Ancient Power and put him down with a return for the win. Yeah, the lack of Ice Beam was definitely making that fight harder than it had any right to be. But with that, it's put up or shut up time featuring the champion, and he's packing some heat. And by heat, I mean very tepid, been left in the microwave for 15 minutes because you were a lazy bastard and didn't grab your food while you were watching Netflix type heat. Pidgeot is nearly a one-shot with Rock Slide, being heal locked thanks to a flinch, allowing for Alakazam to come in second. Alright, well, I one-shot this guy before with Hitmonlee's Strength before Victory Road, so let's try Rock Slide. Oh, it didn't one-shot. Surely he... Yep, never mind, that was completely avoidable. Guess Kanto had to get a quick f*** you in there just because of how much I've been dogging on it so far. That's fine, Fearo's able to come in and grab the Revenge KO with Drill Peck, following up with Steel Wing on Rhydon as he wastes time with Scary Face, a prediction that paid off very slightly because I should have just swapped into Slowbro and one-shot it with Surf. That's fine, he leads into Gyarados afterwards and I can take 2 Dragon Rages, putting me into red HP as Psychic 2-shots, leading to Executor. Now, nothing too crazy here, simply a swap into Ninetales and a Flamethrower to KO and lead into Charizard. And boy, the AI still has no idea how to handle Flash Fire. He attempts Fire Blast a few times through Confuse Ray, hitting himself and missing, but eventually boosting the power of Flamethrower by the time he's at mid-yellow HP, allowing for me to get him into full restore territory, but not before hitting 14 HP. This should be good enough now, though. He basically is only using Aerial Ace, so I can swap into Raichu, take the hit for not very effective damage, then KO with Thunderbolt to win and take the championship. Was a little rough at the end there, but I'll say for certain that this game did not have my complete attention at the time. I guess that's what happens when you play 11 Pokemon games back to back, but we won't have to come back to the Kanto region until... Oh, right, the next video. Well, not a dedicated game until Gen 7, so we'll at least have a nice reprieve until then. So, back to Hoenn we go, and Emerald honestly shouldn't be that big of a threat. We have our only starter remaining in Hoenn with Mudkip, whom I'll be EV training completely as a mixed attacker. 252 for attack, 252 for special attack, or as many as I can depending on how much I can shove under the level cap. Of course, the water typing puts me at a ridiculously good advantage against Roxanne, as Water Gun KOs both of her Geodudes, leaving just Nose Pass to fall to a combo of Water Gun and Mud Slap, basically holding out thanks to an Oran Berry and a couple potions, but thanks to Mud Slap lowering her accuracy, she basically has no choice but to hope and pray with Rock Tumon's Tackle, which they don't do enough to Mudkip, winning me the fight single-handedly. Sweet, and now we have a Marshtomp too. But I do want to grab a second encounter before heading into Dewford, that being Whismur in the Rusturf Tunnel. It's the only encounter here, so it makes sense to use this area to find it, and it's a very strong normal type that I have always enjoyed to have in Hoenn, especially in Emerald, seeing as you have access to 2 copies of Return, one from Fall Arbor Town and one from Pacific Town. So we should have some pretty nice neutral coverage on Marshtomp, eventually once we get around to the second one. As for Whismur's EVs, I'm going with attack and HP, seeing as Exploud is not fast whatsoever, but the power and endurance to outlast other attacks to use said power sounds pretty darn good to me. One more before Brawley after setting sail, and that's Aron over in the Granite Cave. While Aron is technically available in XD coming up after this, I'd much rather use one of the other encounters available at that same Pokespot Aron's in, and Aggron's not going to be very useful once power crept, especially in Generation 6 with Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. Also, I'll be EV training him in attack and defense, as they're his highest stats, and it's not like I'm going to throw him out against anything with water, grass, or fire moves, so who cares about the special side? As for Brawley himself, this is a pretty easy fight. Machop goes down after using Karate Chop, taking Water Gun and Mud Shot as Meditite comes in and goes down to 2 Mud Shots through a Bulk Up. Makuhita's outlast, and 3 Mud Shots are able to do him in as he continually wastes time with 2 Bulk Ups and a healing item, winning me the fight. 2 gyms down with the same Mon, let's make it 3 with Watson, though not before taking out the rival fight on Route 110. We're going 3 versus 3 now, and our newly evolved Loudred tears through her Wailmer and Slugma with Uproar, but not before the latter's able to deliver a Yawn that puts Loudred to sleep as Grovyle comes in. No need to worry about it though, as I can stay in and take a few attacks to see if Loudred can wake up early, but it doesn't, so I swap into Aron and wall against Absorb with other resisted attacks. Using Mud Slap to lower the accuracy, then 2 Headbutts is all she wrote, no Marshtomp needed. But Marshtomp is heavily needed for Watson if I want any chance of beating him. 4 Pokemon on the 3rd Gym Leader is pretty crazy for an official Pokemon title, but thankfully they're all rather incompetent enough for me to nail with Marshtomp's Mud Shot. Voltorb outspeeds and hits Rollout for 1 damage. Electrike uses a Howl to boost attack, but dies before it can take advantage of it. Magneton uses Sonic Boom, probably the most competent thing it can do, then Manectric only hits a slight quick attack, in total not even doing half damage to Marshtomp before one-shotting them all with Mudshot to win. Sweet! 3 badges down and we're only going stronger, especially with the addition of Numel to our team on Route 112 and Solrock in the Meteor Falls. Now, despite already having a rock type in Aron, it's actually a really nice combo to have Rock Psychic, especially with Levitate to get rid of that ground type weakness. Not to mention, Solrock gets access to a bunch of great special moves in Flamethrower, Psychic, Solar Beam, along with Sunny Day for 1-turn usage and boosting Flamethrower's power. Top that all off with Calm Mind to ensure I'm one-shotting everything, and even on top of that, Flamethrower and Psychic are technically infinite obtainable TMs thanks to the Game Corner in Mauville City, so I could swap between those 2 moves depending on the situation, and keeping Sunny Day, Solar Beam, and Calm Mind on there at all times to ensure I keep those single-use TMs on Solrock. Though, of course, a lot of that's much later. Sunny Day is only available in the Scorched Slab on Route 119, Calm Mind is only available after beating Tate and Liza, so this is going to be like endgame stuff. Anyway, Numel's getting the same EV treatment as Marshtomp in both attack and special attack, so that it's able to use both stab typings effectively. And Solrock is my first actually speedy team member, so I'll be EV training it in special attack and speed, despite the former only being a base 55 instead of Solrock's base 95 physical attack. Unfortunate, but again, we'll have Calm Mind and defenses, we should be fine. With that, I'm quickly able to move up to Mount Chimney to handle Maxie, which does end up being a wee bit of a stressor on Marshtomp, barely making it out alive thanks to Magnitude being a hell of a move coming from Camerupt, but only when it wants to be. I'm able to make it through this fight with no KOs in order to safely get to Flannery. Unsurprisingly, Marshtomp's able to mop the floor with her thanks to Water Gun and Mudshot, with Water Gun one-shotting Numel, Mudshot one-shotting Slugma, Camerupt getting heal-locked by the quad-effective Water Gun after hitting a single tackle, eventually going down and leaving just Torkoal. Attract is a very annoying move here, but I'm still able to power through thanks to the strength of Mudshot, grabbing that KO without even dipping below half HP to win the fight. Make that 4 for 4 in terms of gym leaders downed by a single Pokemon. Now what do we want to do about our last member of the team? Well, I want a Grass type, and thankfully that's obtainable with Lileep from the Mirage Tower on Route 111. But I guess accidentally running into a Cacnea while you're here doesn't hurt, and I think I'd much rather have a Grass Dark type than a 3rd Rock type on the squad. I'll be EV training her in special attack since both Grass and Dark are special, and speed despite the base 55. I need something that can go at least somewhat fast other than Solrock. Plus, we get access to Growth immediately, making moves like Absorb, Needle Arm, Giga Drain, and Feint Attack immensely powerful after only a boost or 2. Alright, time for Norman with that situation handled, and Loudred with Return is just a freaking house. Return KOs Spinda, then Slacking is stuck here using counter on the non-truant turns, allowing for me to set up multiple Howls for massive damage. But of course, I cannot seem to put the right held items on anyone this time around, missing the Chesto Berry for the Yawn that leads to me being forced to swap out. All good though, Slacking is gone and Vigoroth is in, an easy 2-shot with Solrock Psychic after swapping in, then doing the same to Linoon after seeing him heal lock himself with Belly Drum. Once again, if I had hit a slightly higher range, I wouldn't have had the scare of potentially getting hit with a +6 boosted normal type move, but hey, it's never the big mistakes that cost me, it's always the ranges on this channel. I hate them so freaking much! Only 3 gym leaders left though, and no losses in Emerald, so let's just push through the late game just as effectively as we did the early and mid game. The Weather Institute provides no challenge whatsoever thanks to Cacnea, but it does provide that ever-important Mystic Water item from Cast Form, immediately being released since we're not considering this a used mon due to not being used in battle. You'll get your time in the sun soon, Cast Form. And the rain. And the hail, but not the sandstorm though. I don't know why they didn't give you a sand form. Anyway, made time before Winona, and her team is actually changed. Just ever so slightly though, as Lombre replaces Wailmer, though we're much more powerful than before, so we're able to one-shot Slugma with Surf on Marshtomp, then swap in a Numel for Grovyle, and oh lord, that Leaf Blade did a lot of damage. Well, I guess I could just go out into our newly evolved Cacturn and hit 2 feint attacks to KO. Not a problem at all. Last out is Lombre, and as you could guess, we're swapping to Loudred to just pummel this gal with a one-shot return to KO and win the fight. Just recycle strategies, they'll always work, I swear. One Devon Scope later, and it's time for Winona. Though I don't have an electric type, I sure as hell have a few rock types. Though our team is rather diverse and has 5 Pokemon, so we're in for quite the fight at this point in the game. Beforehand though, we had Numel evolve into Camerupt and Auron into Lairon, so that should help quite a bit. She leads with Swablu, a pretty easy 2-shot with Solrock normally, but it was a Hyper Potion that prevented us from doing so. So I move over to using Psychic, but that baits her to swap into Skarmory for the attack resistance. Well, that's actually kinda dope, the AI is smart here. But I can use Flamethrower here to KO. Never mind, that barely misses it too, seeing a Steel Wing do around half, as a second Flamethrower is able to hit to KO. Third out is Tropius, and I'm not risking anything. I'm swapping into Camerupt, taking a Solar Beam, and KOing with Flamethrower instead of risking Solrock here. 2 down, 3 to go as Pelipper reveals herself 4th, so I swap into Marshtomp and take a critical Water Gun for my efforts, taking 1 point less than half as she starts using Protect to block Ice Beam. I'm not trying to do much other than get some chip damage here, which I do eventually get, allowing for me to swap into Cacturn only to walk into Supersonic. Alright, fine, let's go for Loudred and hit it with Return, taking it out as well as Swablu once it comes back in, leaving just Altaria. I stay in despite it being around 2/3 HP, since I figured Return should be a one-shot, and oddly enough she just goes for 2 Dragon Dances, being KO'd through her Oran Berry so that I win and she just throws the match. I'll take it. Now, Emerald has a lot more story focus at this point in the game as opposed to Ruby and Sapphire, so in addition to Mount Pyre and the hideout in Lily Cove, I've got to head to the Magma hideout in the Jagged Pass to beat them up there first. But then, not before taking out our final rival battle of the game. May at least has a slightly different team again, starting out with Tropius this time as I go with Camerupt, one-shotting with Flamethrower as Pelipper comes in second. All good, I can just stay in here and use Rock Slide since she doesn't have a Water-type move. This lets me hit 2 of them, even through Supersonic to KO, leading to Slugma who falls to the newly learned Earthquake, leaving just Grovyle to fall to a single Flamethrower for the KO and the win. Well shit, Camerupt's actually putting in major work soloing a rival fight, not bad at all. I guess you're not just a filler fire type after all. 1 Magma and 1 Aqua hideout later, with the former having a battle against Maxie that ultimately goes nowhere, and he's rather easy, and I don't have to use more than half my team. With that, we're ready to head into Moss Deep City for our 7th gym battle though. I did have a bit of a scare in here against a Wobbuffet trainer, but Solrock manages to pull through and KO going around Destiny Bond, Mirror Coat, and Counter, so I'm quite happy that I did not pointlessly lose a Pokemon. Anyway, before Tate and Liza, I made sure to evolve Loudred into Exploud and Lairon into Aggron, giving me 2 even stronger powerhouses for this double battle. Sure, this battle is more difficult than the Ruby and Sapphire version of the battle since they both now have a Claydol and Xatu, as opposed to exclusively Solrock and Lunatone, but that doesn't mean that it's difficult for this team. By leading with Cacturn and Solrock against Xatu and Claydol, I can go for Giga Drain on Claydol and Rock Slide on both, flinching Xatu and doing a near one-shot with Giga Drain on Claydol, taking Earthquake for minimal damage on Cacturn as both Xatu and Solrock are immune. Well, very nice. Well, that flinch makes it easy enough for me to follow up with Flamethrower for chip damage on Claydol, then using Cacturn's Feint Attack to KO Xatu, and lead into their own Solrock with a Hyper Potion draining Claydol's turn. Easy enough then, a Giga Drain should KO Claydol from here, so I instead Flamethrower the opposing Solrock with my own, getting the burn to nullify the effectiveness of Rock-type moves, leaving Cacturn to... Of course, barely missed the KO with Giga Drain. All good though, a Hyper Potion is used yet again next turn on Solrock, so I use Flamethrower with Solrock on it, then Giga Drain the opposing Solrock in order to get that off the field and leave just Lunatone. Lunatone has no attacking moves aside from Psychic, so this pair should be able to just double target Claydol, KOing with Flamethrower and Giga Drain, then eventually outlast Lunatone despite Calm Mind and Light Screen. It takes a bit, some Leech Seed, and even some swapping Solrock into Aggron, since this Majora's Mask wannabe is staying alive a little too long, and doing a little too much damage, but eventually I'm able to put it down with a mix of Feint Attack, Leech Seed, and a Mist Hypnosis on Aggron into an Iron Tail for the KO, and the win. Boy, describing double battles without going on for an eternity is hard. Now to take a big sip of water to see what the next game in our lineup is gonna be. I got a nice gallon of water right here. Alright. Oh no, it's XD! I can't believe that I just did an authentic spit take that almost resulted in me shocking my entire household by accidentally spit taking onto a surge protector. You know, the stupid things we do for content. Anyway, keeping with the theme of double battles, we've got one against Maxie and Tabitha in the Moss Deep Space Station, as we participate in a multi-battle alongside Steven, and he's only gonna allow me to choose 3 Pokemon. This only comes up once during the main story, but I love the added challenge of not being able to use your full arsenal of Pokemon with you, unlike something like the double battle on the top of Spear Pillar and Diamond and Pearl against Mars and Jupiter when you're working alongside Barry. You both have access to all 6 of your Pokemon, so it's kind of like a lopsided experience, whereas here, it's a lot more challenging. But, you know, by that point, I've already talked about that, and I've already beaten everybody. So, one chase through Groudon, Kyogre, and Rayquaza later, and we're ready for Juan. Yeah, I'm just gonna overlook the team leader fights. They are not interesting whatsoever on watching them back, and I'd rather not bore you. He leads with Love Disc, so I go with Cacturn, using 1 growth through Sweet Kiss to get that little bit of special attack boost that I need to sweep his team. Sweet Kiss is nullified thanks to a Person Berry, allowing for me to one-shot both Love Disc and Celio with Giga Drain as Kingdra comes out third. He immediately starts going for Spam Double Team, and that is exactly why we have Feint Attack. 2 of these boosted by a single growth is a 2-shot, KOing after nearly being decimated by a single Ice Beam, then leaving just Crawdaunt to be outsped and KO'd with Giga Drain, doing the same to Whiscash to fully heal Cacturn and win the fight. I knew those were not going to outspeed with their abysmal speed stats, even with Cacturn at base 55, so I said screw it, may as well just stay in and get that HP back. Alright, last 6 fights that are important to get me to the last game of this leg of the Nuzlocke, and instead of having Wally at the end of Victory Road, he's at the beginning. Not a problem since I'm still 8 levels above him, sweeping Altaria and Roselia with Swampert's Ice Beam, Delcatty with Return despite assist getting Leech Seed, but it couldn't land, so I just use Earthquake for the one-shot KO, then do the same with Magneton and Gardevoir to win the fight. Level cap was 55, so I technically could have gotten away with level 53 here, but I knew I could just do it at 52 and save that little extra wiggle room for the trainers later in Victory Road. But with that, it's time for the Elite Four and Champion, who shouldn't be too bad based on our prior experience. Sydney leads Mightyena against my Swampert, whom one-shots with Surf after getting a crit, then does the same to Cacturn and Shiftry with 1 Ice Beam apiece, even through the latter outspeeding and using Double Team. 4th out is Crawdaunt, a 2-shot with Earthquake as he wastes his turn with Swords Dance despite being slower, leaving just Absol to fall to a single Surf after a Light Slash. Well, I mean, that's just how the cookie crumbles when the level cap is so much higher than the first member, but hey, it's not like he's the only easy one. Phoebe's up second, and would you believe it, growth plus Feint Attack equals death on literally every Pokemon here, KOing both Dusclops, Bayonet, Sableye despite being neutral damage, and Bayonet number 2 to win the fight without damage. 3 more to go, Glacia's up next, and this one's a little wonky but doable. I start out with Soul Rock using Calm Mind as Celio uses Hail, then she starts going for Body Slam. Dang it, I was hoping that she'd go for Ice Ball here, but that's fine. We avoid Paralysis, go for Sunny Day after 4 Calm Minds, hitting Solar Beam to KO Celio, Flamethrower to KO both Glalie, then a second Solar Beam to take out Walrein as the last Celio comes in 5th. That's fine though, charging Solar Beam before Hail comes down means we can blast it out next turn to KO and win the fight. Probably should have gone for a Cherry Berry instead of a Citrus Berry in the event that Body Slam happened over Ice Ball, but I'm happy with how that fight went. Lastly, but not least, it's Drake time, and let me just say it's God's plan for me to utterly freeze your team in place, KOing Shelgon, Altaria, Kingdra with 2 Earthquakes through 2 useless Dragon Dances, Flygon, and Salamence, all with Swampert to win me the fight. Yeah, I know, dumb joke, but I honestly know nothing about Drake other than that song, and how it fits with Lavender Town's theme. Champion time, and Wallace is here instead of Steven. Not a problem at all, seeing as we took care of Juan earlier, let's just try that again with Cacturn. However, not immediately. He leads off with Wailord, and since I don't want to take an Ice Beam to the face, I'm going for Exploud first, KOing in one shot with a critical return as Tentacruel comes in second. Well, I guess that critical does throw things for a loop, so I suppose I'll just continue going for return and see what happens next. Well, a Toxic is a little unfortunate, but that's actually just fine. Once he hits Hydro Pump, I realize that I can't stay in past my Shadow Ball in return, so at least I got a 2-for-1 exchange with Exploud before Ludicolo comes in third. Perfect, I should be able to use Cacturn from here. Well, the critical Surf doesn't help, but him spamming Double Team really does. I can just keep mirroring it with Growth as Feint Attack will just hit right through it all, so I use 5 growths, seeing 5 more double teams, and KOing with Feint Attack next turn. Sweet, this is a sweep from me. Giga Drain plows right on through Milotic, Whiscash, and Gyarados in sequence to win me the fight, and Emerald without a single death. Not bad, but it was all a warm-up for probably the hardest game we've had so far, Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness. So, despite it seeming like I've been dreading XD during this entire video, I haven't. In fact, like Coliseum, I haven't played this game in over 3 years, not since my Professor Oak's challenge video on the title. What I was dreading was the difficulty of this game, though. Pokemon XD has pretty freeform level caps, only 6 in total with 6 important fights, with a few sub-bosses here and there, but Shadow Pokemon are buffed to hell and back in this game. So much so that they have more than just Shadow Rush, with all Shadow moves being super effective on non-Shadow Pokemon, and the final boss? Well, not to spoil it, but consider him Volo from Legends Arceus but on crack, but then the crack itself is also on crack. Alas, let's just jump straight into it so I can show you what I mean. Our starter here is Eevee, which we won't be using for long since we get out of the Pokemon HQ lab, heading to the Gateon port in order to get ourselves a Water Stone to evolve it into Vaporeon, and to grab our second encounter for the run, Poochyena. Don't mind the Teddy Ursa here, we were forced to snag it back in the HQ lab, so I just used the call function in order for it to act like it's not battling. Poochyena, though, is pretty important, having the ability Intimidate once it evolves, and having access to a bunch of great physical moves like Poison Fang, Dig, Facade, among others, while the Choice Band is a rather accessible item in this game, so that'll definitely help later on. Vaporeon as well is a tanky monster that can also attack pretty hard on the special side. With Ice Beam and Water Pulse being available TMs later, I'm feeling pretty good about my choice. Not to mention it starts off with Bite, which is special in Gen 3, so I'm pretty happy with that. Well, that and Flareon was my only other choice, and you won't catch me dead using a Flareon before Gen 4. Also, in case you're worried about me using a Stone evolution this early, we'll be learning Water Gun by level up at level 16 before Lavrina's cap of 20, so we should be fine. With Poochyena in hand though, we can head back to the lab, then to a gate village to purify Poochyena almost immediately. I tried my best to find rematchable trainers around here, but since they're so limited, I can't find anything that just gives the EVs I want to Vaporeon or Poochyena. So I just scrapped the idea of EV training for this run, despite it being a pretty darn hard game, and just proceed as a normal playthrough. Also, shoutouts to you guys for letting me know in the last video that the name raider was in fact here in a gate village. I can finally rename my starter after the worst copy pasta imaginable. Anyway, moving towards Mount Battle, we can get through and get the Vander at the end, who just sends us off to our next objective, which happens to be the Shadow Pokemon Lab from the last game. We have our choice of 6 different Shadow Pokemon here, but by fighting Brow 6 of the Mighty Orphan Cypher Rangers, we can grab ourselves a Baltoy. This is a defensive Pokemon with Levitate, ability to set up dual screens, and powerful moves in Earthquake and Psychic, which sounds like exactly what I need at this point. Sadly, most of that is going to be locked up until a little bit later. However, we have to fight Lavrina first to get out of here and get to some of those items. She's rather bodacious in comparison to the rest of her team, but we should have a good shot of taking her down despite her numbers disadvantage. She leads off with Luvdisc and Beautifly as I go with the newly evolved Mightyena and Vaporeon, getting that Intimidate drop, then double targeting our Beautifly here with Bite from both Vaporeon and Mightyena to get the KO as Luvdisc wastes time with Agility and Tackle, allowing for me to KO the second Pokemon in Roselia with 3 bites, as last but not least as Delicatty. Now, if this was the first Shadow Pokemon I could pop up in here, I would have been over the moon with using it, but alas, it's just a wall for me to clear at this point. Shadow Rush manages to take Mightyena down to just 9 HP, but after a few collective bites from both of my Pokemon, she is left with just Luvdisc, and without pursuit, our Mightyena is safe from harm as I swap in a Baltoy, taking Luvdisc's Water Gun, and taking her out soon thereafter. And now while you'd think bosses would stay simple throughout, they in fact do not by a long shot. This is by far the easiest one. Now that I've gotten access to Byrite Town though, Pokespots are now available and yield wild Pokemon, something that we couldn't get in Coliseum. There's only 3 wild Pokemon per spot with only 3 spots, though I do run into Mirror B before all of it, which is kinda neat, taking out his numerous Lombres as well as a previously used Voltorb before putting him out of his misery. Anyway, I can get Trapinch from the rock spot and Munchlax? Actually, if you didn't know, XD is the introduction of some Gen 4 Pokemon despite being a Gen 3 game, such as Bonsly and Munchlax. Really wish they'd try doing this sort of thing again in some of the newer games to tease upcoming Pokemon. Anyway, we can finish up by grabbing Surskit from the Oasis spot, and I would have gotten a cave spot encounter, but Wooper ended up showing up first, so I said screw it, I'll catch this guy and save it for an in-game trade in Pyrite Town shortly. I can't get that until I clear out the boss of the ONBS building post Cypher takeover though, that being Exall. He leads off with Girafarig and Loudred while I go with Mightyena and the newly evolved Masquerain, using Double Intimidate to nerf Loudred down to barely any attack while leaving Girafarig as the main threat. But Loudred turns out to still be a threat because Seismic Toss never loses that set damage. Guess I should have seen that coming, but Girafarig is able to be taken down by Trapinch's and Mightyena's Bite once swapped in, KOing and leading to Mawile third. Now this, in fact, is actually our encounter for the Pyrite building. I figured I wasn't going to be able to get use for Mawile anywhere else, and I figured I may as well burn as many encounters I need on this much more difficult game, instead of something like Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, where sure, the Fairy type is added, but we have much better options of one, such as Azumarill. Anyway, with Mawile snagged in our first Great Ball, Raichu comes out last as I swap Trapinch into Vaporeon in the attempt to deal as much damage out as possible, using Water Gun and Mud Sap on Raichu, getting it below half, before Baltoy's unfortunately at too low of HP to continue, leaving just Masquerain as our last Pokemon with high HP remaining. Fortunately, one more Water Gun followed up by 2 quick attacks from Vaporeon and Masquerain is enough to get the KO, leaving just Loudred, but I am swapping in between Pokemon on the first slot and attempting to KO with Masquerain, but once I get back into Mightyena, I'm finally able to pull the trigger with a Bite, getting a bit lucky and KOing without a single Pokemon lost. I figured some of these bosses were going to pick off a Pokemon or 2 here and there, and that I'd have to set up a new one in every area that I headed to, hence why we're grabbing so many encounters early on. But I will certainly take some good strategy and a wee bit of luck to save some time. One trip to Rilgum Tower later, buying some TMs in the process, we're ready to save Phoenix City from an entire portion of Cypher just impersonating the entire town. Yep, just dupe everybody by replacing the entire population of a town with grunts. That'll definitely work. Definitely productive and definitely not a waste of funds. At least here, I can get myself a Shadow Snorunt as my encounter, a really strong Pokemon that'll evolve into Glalie, and while it does make using Frostlass later a little more difficult in later games, I'm not too worried about losing out on that when plenty of other Pokemon will be better options in those games. Anyway, after playing a shitload of bingo in order to get Poke Coupons for powerful TMs, seriously, this game is addicting. I must have played 3 hours of it and didn't get bored, so that's a pretty well-constructed minigame mode. And all of this provides me a few TMs of Shadow Ball and Ice Beam, as well as a few held items, and we're ready to take on Snaddle following that, the head of Cypher's operation over here in Phoenix City. Now the hard part about this fight is that I'm forced to fight a peon in front of him named Eggrog, and he's got a pretty strong team at this point as well, so I've got to ensure that I both am able to take him down with minimal HP loss, while also keeping a good lead for Snaddle. He goes for Lantern and Quagsire as I go with Snorunt and Vaporeon, using them and a Bite Crunch combo that does a nearly half to Lantern, but a well-placed critical bite and protect from Snorunt next turn prevents damage to me that turn, giving me a quick way to hit Quagsire with Ice Beam, freezing him solid. Well, I guess I can try riding out the storm with this, as his Shadow Lunatone comes out and uses Shadow Sky to set up a new form of weather that's not seen anywhere else because we don't see Shadow Pokemon again until Pokemon Go, and this basically goes on for the rest of the battle as well. Eventually getting to the point where Metang is his only other Pokemon, and in the effort to ensure that the defrosting never happens, I use Baltoy's Psychic to KO, turning into a 2-on-1 scenario, KOing with a myriad of Mightyena's Shadow Ball and Baltoy's Mud Slap, winning me the battle. Well, it certainly was a little bit lucky and definitely a bit speedy in terms of my description, but double battles are very hard to describe and try to keep them straight. With Phoenix City freed, though, we're able to head off to the wreckage of the SS Libra, the ship where we see Shadow Lugia take up into the air at the beginning cutscene, but we're not here for story, we're here for beatdown. From the wreckage, though, we're able to save a Bonsly, getting a set of leftovers for free, which is really important, but most of all, we're being put to sleep by a group of Team Snag'em Grunts, where they take the snag machine and we gotta go beat the crap out of all of them in order to get back our Snaggy boy. The head of the organization, Gonzap, is our fourth of 6 bosses with level caps, but before we can get to him, we've gotta get a few new encounters first. Firstly, with access to the outskirts stand, we're able to talk to a scientist who asks us to purify his Shadow Togepi, and as a reward, we're given Elekid as our encounter here. It's got all 3 elemental punches, fantastic for a Pokemon that actually hits with special moves, along with Cross Chop, which is cool, but not a big deal since it's both inaccurate and not on the right side of the attack spectrum for Elekid. I also went ahead and slotted in that new trade that I received from Duking in Pyrite Town, having given up the Wooper I captured for a Larvitar. Unfortunately, I probably won't end up using it since it evolves at level 55 in a Tyranitar, and the last level cap in XD is 50, so it probably won't end up emerging in battle and therefore will get saved for another game. As for the head of Team Snag'em is concerned, Gonzap's battle starts against Electrode and Nuzleaf, while I go for Masquerain and Vaporeon. Maybe a strange decision against, Pokemon that they're weak to, but I want to fire off Double Protect to get through Fake Out and a potential Explosion from Electrode, but it doesn't happen. So I swap Masquerain out into Mightyena for a second Intimidate, and for something that's not weak to Electric on the field. All good though, Nuzleaf fires off Hyper Beam, so he's frozen for a turn. Didn't know a non-fully evolved Pokemon could get Hyper Beam, so it's an easy double target with Shadow Ball and Ice Beam to KO Electrode. Vileplume's out next, and I figured double targeting that as well would be the best option, once again KOing with a combo of Shadow Ball and Ice Beam. It's replaced with Whiscash as Nuzleaf burns another 2 turns with a really weak Hyper Beam. Doing well enough so far, but I figured I'll swap Electabuzz in over Mightyena now that Doggo's down to half HP. Taking a Hyper Beam from Whiscash for a little under half as a double target Ice Beam and Water Pulse combo does him in. Last out is Skarmory, perfect for Electabuzz and Vaporeon to take out, but boy do I get close to getting KO'd thanks to a Hyper Beam from Skarmory, bringing Electabuzz down to 4 HP. All good though, simply protect next turn and take out Nuzleaf with Vaporeon's Ice Beam to KO and win the fight. I swear, man, doubles have too many things to worry about, that's why I don't play VGC. The only year I actually played that seriously was 2011, and that's because it was Univadex format, therefore only 156 Pokemon to deal with, even less because of legendaries being restricted, and a lot less variants to rely on. I got 52nd place too at the National Championships, without knowing the interaction of Beat Up and Justified boosting on Terrakion, so that just tells you the level of competition there. Speaking of which, if you're actually into VGC, I'm somehow on the same esports team as James Beck, Aaron Cybertron Zhang, and Wolf Glick, so that's pretty cool. We all make collaborative content over on Beast Coast Pokemon, actually. Link in the description if you want some more content after we wrap this one up. Speaking of which, though, all we've got left is Gorgon over in the Cypher Key Lair before we head to the final area. Before we can get to him though, the first Shadow Pokemon we encounter here in the Cypher Key Lair is Zangoose, so I make sure to snag it just in case I need some team filler later on. Then after beating the hell out of all the grunts, we're ready for Monkey Man, using monkey strategies where all of his Pokemon have Protect and Earthquake, except for the Shadow ones of course. Makes sense, he looks like a monkey. Lairon and Celio are his lead Pokemon as I go with Electabuzz and Vaporeon. Seems pretty simple, right? Thunderbolt Celio, Water Pulse the Lairon. Well, Lairon uses Protects, but I am able to attack first before an Earthquake comes out, so no damage to me as Celio goes down and gets replaced with Slowking. I keep the same combo here, Thunderbolt on Slowking and Water Pulse on Lairon, but the former doesn't quite KO. It's close! The Water Pulse manages to KO Lairon, with Gorgon replacing it with Ursaring as Slowking's able to deliver Water Pulse to Electabuzz. It does a little over quarter damage, but I am much more worried about the Ursaring that's on the board because I don't have any super effective attacks, and as we saw in the Pokemon Crystal part of this Nuzlocke, it's a tank and a house at the same time. I'm gonna double Protect to see what happens, and sure enough, Ursaring also goes for a Protect as Slowking uses Earthquake, hitting nobody. That's probably the first time I've ever seen that happen, but that's all good. Now I can swap Electabuzz out for Masquerain, get the Intimidate off on Ursaring, then use Vaporeon's Bite to KO Slowking. 3 down as he replaces it with Primeape, though Ursaring is a f***ing monster, using Slash to crit Vaporeon to do around 100 damage. Well, shoot, I guess we have to swap Vaporeon out here or use Protect and get another turn out of it. So I think I'm gonna swap in Mightyena for another Intimidate drop, then use Protect with Vaporeon for the turn, only to bring out Masquerain and Claydol next turn for both another Intimidate drop and for 2 Pokemon that don't need to use Protect for Earthquake. Of course, the Shadow Primeape doesn't have Earthquake, but I was hoping Ursaring would go for it since Primeape also doesn't have Protect. Not a problem though, I can simply use Earthquake on Claydol to hit both of his Pokemon, doing half to each, then using Ice Beam to nearly KO Primeape. Well, I was hoping that would KO. I guess I'll Protect and hopefully knock off this Primeape with Earthquake so that Masquerain doesn't go down, and sure enough, that does end up working. Ursaring's in red HP as his last Pokemon is Hypno, so I'm gonna fire off Shadow Ball with Masquerain and Earthquake with Claydol, KOing Ursaring and doing around a third to Hypno, but not quite enough for Masquerain to pick up the KO with Shadow Ball. I was worried since Shadow Down lowers both of my defenses, but it doesn't outspeed, so I can just follow up with Quick Attack next turn to KO, rubbing salt in the wound with a critical hit. With Gorgon defeated though, Cypher's final stand is over on Citadart Isle, and let me just say that I love the way that this game looks, even especially in comparison to Coliseum. It's just been fun revisiting this one, despite its difficulty. Actually, I think the difficulty is also making it fun. I don't know why I said despite. Anyway, all we've got left are the red and blue goons as well as Master Greevil himself, so let's storm that place. Firstly though, the captain on the isle has a Shadow Golduck that I snag. Figured I'd grab it just in case of some losses here, and of course it's the first Shadow Pokemon on the island, so I don't really have a choice. It sucks! I really want to save Gen 1 Pokemon for later, and instead grab a different encounter from here like Shadow Salamence? I would have loved to use that for the final battle. Speaking of dragons though, I finally managed to get Trapinch to evolve all the way up into Flygon during the rematch against Snaddle, right before the fight against Blue Goon Ardos. Yeah, I know they're the sons of Greevil, but they're just goons to pound the faces of in, so I'm not concerned. Nor the story, only Unga Bunga beatdown. Ardos leads off with Swellow and Alakazam as we go Electabuzz and Mightyena, using Thunderbolt to KO Swellow, but not before he sets up Shadow Sky, then taking an Ice Punch with Mightyena before blasting out a physical Shadow Ball to KO. 2 down, 4 to go as Kingdra and Heracross replace them, though they're both damaged by Shadow Sky, so that's a little bit of a help. I've got to double target that Heracross if I want to keep Mightyena in right now, and I do. So I go ahead and fire off Thunderbolt and Shadow Ball to KO, leading to his own Shadow Electabuzz. Why am I able to get a second one of these? Well, I can't be too concerned about game design right now since, oh shit, Kingdra just landed a Hydro Pump that took Mightyena down to 10 HP, then down to 2 with Shadow Sky. Well, I gotta swap into our newly evolved Glalie then. Afterwards, I managed to hit Thunderbolt on Kingdra with Electabuzz for some massive damage, but then take a shitload of damage from Shadow Break, putting him into the red and out for the rest of the fight. Glalie thankfully takes an Ice Beam from Kingdra for minimal damage, but to get one more turn out of Electabuzz, I'm using Protect, then using Ice Beam to KO Kingdra, getting no damage on Glalie for the turn, as Shadow Snorlax takes his place. Now this thing is a monster, and the first instance of seeing a Pokemon with the move Shadow End, a 120 power, 60% accurate move that does half of the user's HP as recoil damage. But recall that all Shadow moves are super effective against non-Shadow Pokemon, and we've got ourselves a big problem. The only Pokemon I'm remotely okay with losing here is Flygon, as Claydol already plays the role of a ground type very well, but everyone else is pretty substantially important. Maybe I should have purified and brought out Zangoose and Golduck for its fodder. But I don't want to dwell on potential decisions for too long. Instead, I'm swapping Electabuzz out into Claydol as it's super bulky, unfortunately taking a Shadow Mist that harshly reduces accuracy, comboing perfectly for a Shadow End that brings Claydol down to 14 HP. Thankfully, Snorlax takes half as recoil, but I cannot be taking another one of those. Shadow Sky ends here as, of course, Snorlax starts recovering with leftovers, but I've got to swap again, going for Flygon to reset my evasiveness, but we just take another Shadow Mist from Electabuzz, using Ice Beam on it with Glalie to do over half, thankfully, but then taking a critical Shadow End to our newly swapped in Flygon, going down and leaving us with only Vaporeon as a full HP friendo. It's now or never, I suppose. I'm going for Ice Beam with both of my Pokemon targeting Snorlax, since I've got to make sure this thing dies before it kills another Pokemon. But I take another Shadow Mist before Glalie can hit Snorlax with Ice Beam, and we're able to freeze him solid. Not that it matters, since the double target takes him out, leaving it to be a 2-on-1 situation, but that would have been useful if it didn't. Luckily, Electabuzz doesn't have the equipment necessary to take out any more of my Pokemon, using Shadow Half to take half of the HP of everyone on the field, including itself, before a double targeting Ice Beam puts him down for good. Well, that was a terrible use of Flygon. I definitely could have gotten a lot more out of this Dragon type in a game better suited for him, but that's only one of the encounters that I could have gotten from the Rock Pokespot. The other two were Gligar, without Gliscor available, or Sandshrew, which I've got a save Kanto Pokemon for Let's Go, so in reality Trapinch was my only good encounter. With that said, after beating the hell out of the monkey again in some preparation, we're ready for the penultimate battle against Eldis. He's leading Ninjask and Manectric as I go with Glalie and Vaporeon. I've got to be able to KO that Ninjask with Ice Beam on either one, then use the other to damage Manectric since it's got Shadow End and I need bodies that are bulky. Thankfully, Silver Wind doesn't do much coming from Ninjask, and Shadow End from Manectric misses, so we're safe from damage for now. I've got the Quick Claw on Vaporeon right now, so it would be nice to have that proc this turn and KO Manectric, but as Salamence comes in, I know we need to target that bastard immediately. Shadow Rush does some good damage to Vaporeon as Shadow End lands on Glalie for half, but Ice Beam's able to double target the Salamence slot, taking both Salamence and the newly entered Flygon down, replacing it with Marowak. Well, that's another Pokemon weak to Ice, so I'm going to target that with Glalie, then use Protect with Vaporeon, hoping I can get a Shadow End in that slot, but instead I see a Shadow Mist from Manectric to lower Glalie's evasiveness. Not a problem though, as I can Ice Beam the Manectric as Lapras comes in, then swap Vaporeon for Mightyena in the effort to reduce the attack of Shadow End, which does enough to make Mightyena take less than half from it. Manectric is then taken out with Ice Beam, leaving Lapras in a 2-on-1 scenario. Despite us being in a very commanding position because of this, we still need to take Lapras seriously as Shadow Pokemon are still very threatening even on their own. Shadow Sky is set up and does damage to both Glalie and Mightyena, with the former recovering it thanks to leftovers that we caught from the SS Libra, but I'm not trusting of half HP Bozos to stay alive against Lapras. So I'm going to swap out Mightyena for Masquerain for some additional attack reduction, then use Sing with Glalie in the hopes to put her to sleep, but no dice. Shadow Storm ends up being used, hitting both Glalie and Masquerain for minimal damage, but it's enough for me to consider Glalie not usable from this turn onwards. So we're going to get one more out of it with Protect, then use Silver Wind on Lapras in the attempt to Fiend for an Omni boost, but once again no dice, so both of my Pokemon are too weak to continue. So I've got to swap into Claydol and Electabuzz, hopefully putting Claydol into the slot where Lapras attacks, though it's Shadow Storm so it hits both. Though I suppose it did matter since Claydol was put into the slot where Lapras got a critical hit, so I'm pretty happy about that one. At this point though, the fight's over, as both Claydol and Electabuzz are faster, with the latter hitting Thunderbolt for that tasty super effective damage, leaving her on red as Claydol blasts out Psychic to KO and win the fight. that was very stressful, but all we've got is one more battle, so we've got to prepare our final team. With all of them at level 50, I'm going in with the same team as we did against Eldis. However, I'm ready to lose all but one of them in this fight, as we are going against a team of 7, with Shadow Lugia, then Moltres, Articuno, and Zapdos all on the team at the same time. Yeah, like I said, Volo on crack, with the crack also being on crack. Shadow Lugia is first, therefore on its own as an individual battle, and sure I could cheat and use the Master Ball, but I'm gonna take the half damage with Glalie from Shadow Blast, then hit it with Ice Beam from both Glalie and Vaporeon. All I've got to do here though is Ice Beam with Vaporeon and Protect with Glalie and... Oh, of course this bastard doesn't just go for the KO and spare my Vaporeon. Well, it was a 50-50 shot, with one of the choices leading to the death of Glalie, so how was I supposed to know that that was the correct decision? Oh well, I don't care. Let's go right into the battle with Greavil. He leads off with Rhydon and Moltres, as I'm once again going Vaporeon and Glalie since I didn't have the option to swap between them beforehand. All of his Pokemon are Shadow, so I'm gonna need to ensure I survive long enough, and thankfully Moltres goes for Shadow Fire on Vaporeon, allowing for Ice Beam to take out Rhydon, and Water Pulse to do over half to Moltres. I'm gonna go for Protect with Vaporeon here to get another turn out of him on the field, though Shadow Fire hits Glalie since... Of course he does. That was who I was trying to use to KO the newly entered Executor. Well, hey, at least I protected against Shadow End. From here, I can outspeed the Moltres with my newly entered Electabuzz on the field, putting us up 5-4 as Tauros takes its place, though we're quickly up to 5-3 as Ice Beam KOs Executor from Vaporeon. Here comes Articuno, and I am double targeting the birds. I know Tauros is a threat, but I find Articuno more of the threat. I managed to paralyze Articuno with Thunderbolt though, so I might be able to KO it with Vaporeon's Ice Beam, but of course the Bird Brain manages to outspeed despite paralysis, KOing and forcing me to go into Masquerain. All good though, I can just Thunderbolt Articuno to KO and put me up 4-2, though Tauros outspeeds Masquerain going for Shadow Hold, basically a double targeting mean look on both Pokemon. Not a problem though, as Zapdos comes in and takes Ice Beam from the Masquerain, taking around half as Electabuzz hits Thunderbolt next turn to nearly KO, but of course a critical Shadow Rush from Tauros manages to take out Electabuzz from nearly full HP. All good though, as long as Shadow Bolt doesn't KO Masquerain, which it barely doesn't, 3 HP, it goes down to Ice Beam. In fact, I think this is the best thing that can happen, since now Shadow Sky KOs in between turns, then I can bring out both my full HP Mightyena and Claydol against his Tauros, wasting his turn with Shadow Hold as I double target with Psychic and Facade. They collectively bring him into the red as Shadow Rush is used on Mightyena, doing barely any damage and allowing 2 of my Pokemon to survive as Claydol delivers the final attack of Psychic, winning me the fight and getting me the f*** out of Generation 3. Holy shit. 7 games of Gen 3 had me worried about burning so many Pokemon in this, especially with how worrisome that final battle can get. 4 legendaries, with no legendaries at my disposal, but I think with the options I had, I did a fantastic job of weaving through it. So this is what the graph of used Pokemon is looking like up to this point. Showing only up through Gen 3, we're up to a massive 156 Pokemon used out of 386, so we're left with 230. While I didn't end up using things like Mawile in the major battles of XD, I did end up using it on a lot of the Cypher peons throughout the game as well as other trainers, but things like Larvitar, Zangoose, and Golduck just went unused, only grabbed in case of emergency, but they never needed to be grabbed for emergencies. Kinda sucks that the level cap didn't go high enough for me to use Tyranitar, though I feel like we'll have a good place to use it coming up in the next video. Pokemon Generation 4 is on my radar, with Diamond, Pearl, Platinum, Heart Gold, and Soul Silver all in one video. That's gonna be an insanely long one, so be on the lookout for around the end of October with that one, and then I'll see you guys for that. Stay safe, stay healthy, I'll see you next time.